Hi, everybody. We're going to get started. Hey. So my name's Lily. I'm with the events team here at Politics and Prose. I'm going to keep this nice and short and sweet. So before we start, I would just ask you to silence your cell phones so we don't disrupt the event. And then when it gets time for Q&A, there's this white pillar right in front of me. I'm just going to ask you to line up there and have your books ready. So without further ado, tonight I'm excited to welcome Samantha Shannon, celebrating the release of her new book, Dark Mirror, the highly anticipated fifth installment of her Bone Season series. Samantha is the New York Times and Sunday Times best-selling author of the Bone Season and Roots of Chaos series. Her work has been translated into 26 languages. Shannon will be in conversation with Sabaa Tahir, a former newspaper editor who grew up in California's Mojave Desert and her family's 18-room motel. There she spent her time devouring fantasy novels, listening to thunderous indie rock, and playing guitar and piano badly. Her #1 New York Times bestselling And Amber the Ashes series has been translated into more than 35 languages, and the first book in the series was named of Time 100's 10 best young adult books of all time. Tahir's most recent novel, All My Rage, won the National Book Award for Young People's Literature, the Michelle L. Prince Award, the Boston Globe Horn Book Award for Fiction, and was an instant New York Times bestseller. So that's all I'm going to say. So please welcome to Politics and Prose, Samantha Shannon and Sabaa Tahir.
Oh, yes. We would love to take a picture where you all hold your books up. And Samantha also holds her book up. And it's going to be great. Just the right You're good. I have no That's okay. Hold up your book. Everyone yell, I love Paige. I love Paige. Beautiful. Okay, wait. Close up. I love this animal. Very nice. Thank you so much.
I know, I never remember either. Why?
Hello? Yes.
Okay, yeah, it was. Oh, thank you so much for showing up. This wasn't ticketed, so I was scared no one was going to come. Thank you.
DC will always show up for fantasy.
Clearly.
Yes. So I'm reading this wonderful book, and the title is important, but actually what's underneath the title is more important because it is The Bone Season, the author's preferred text. Mm-hmm. And I am absolutely loving it. But this was a book that was first published in 2013 when you were only 21.
Yeah.
And you revised the first 4 novels and released them as the author's preferred text. So I was wondering, can you talk about what it was like to revise your debut and how your 10 years of experience informed the project?
Sure. Yeah, it's a pretty strange thing for an author to do. So I think there are a few authors' preferred texts in existence, but it's mostly, 1 or 2 sentences that maybe the author didn't like in hindsight. So basically, The Bone Season first came out in 2013. And like you said, I was 21 when it came out. I was 19 when I wrote the first draft, 20 when I sold it. And there was this huge media storm around it because of that. If you've been following my career for a long time, I think it must have been a really slow news day when it was first announced. Because
I remember it. Yeah. I remember when it happened. And what was crazy to me is how they didn't let you be you. They had to compare you. And even as someone who wasn't in publishing, I was like, that's annoying.
Yeah, it was annoying for me because they were comparing me to, really huge authors. And fortunately, I was quite grounded when I was 19. And I would be like, no, I think that's pretty unlikely. And I'd be like, I want to be the first Samantha Shannon, not the next somebody else. So I was like, oh, that's very cute. So anyway, there was...
But you were the first Samantha Shannon.
I was, yeah.
You did
I was
it.
the first Samantha Shannon. I was glad that I said that, and I didn't really buy into the whole hype, and it was weird because nobody had actually read the book. It was just they were basing it on the fact that I was like a teenage prodigy, and I was really, really shy and introverted when all this was happening. And it was very intense because I was doing like wild things like photo shoots with Vogue magazine. I was like called out to New York to do a shoot with the New York Times magazine, like just things that just you wouldn't imagine in your wildest dreams. But for me, I found it very frightening. And I started to become very anxious. I felt very watched, and I became almost quite paranoid. And basically, all of this meant that the Bones season did not get the editing that it should have, because I was trying to deal with all of this media attention, plus the fact that I was doing a degree at the time and trying to edit a book. So basically, as soon as the Bones season came out, I was like, I just feel like I could have done that so much more justice. And I love the Bones season. Like, I love this story so much. It's such a story of my heart. And I basically, as soon as it was published, I knew I would have just loved to do it again. But I felt like it was impossible. So anyway, 10 years passed. I published The Priory of the Orange Tree, which is my other series. I had published 4 Bone season books by then. And Bloomsbury, my publisher, said to me, like, how would you feel about us doing new covers for the 10th anniversary? And I said, great. How would you feel if I maybe redid the whole inside? So they said, okay, like, how much do you mean? And I was like, oh, just a bit, just nothing major.
A couple things.
A couple of things, just a few little tweaks. And they said, okay, well, why don't you take chapter 1 and put track changes on so that we can see like how much. Well, if you've ever used track changes, you will know that it turns the page quite an aggressive shade of red.
Blood red.
Yeah, by the time I sent it back, it was really red, guys. So I sent it back, and they were sort of like, "Oh, well, that's quite a lot of changes." I said, "Yeah, how are we feeling about that?" And they said, "Okay, well, we can see you're really passionate about this." And I was very passionate about it. I was like, "I know I can do this story more justice. I know it was a strong idea, and that I can do this better." And yeah, they let me, and then I did the whole series.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
Was there ever a point mid-edit where you were like, what am I doing?
Yeah, a few times. I think the moment where I felt like, what am I doing, was when we actually had to reverse engineer the PDFs. Because when we write books, we start in something like Word or Scrivener, and then they get converted into a PDF, right? But you're not really supposed to unconvert them back into a Word document. And when you do that, the Word document starts behaving really weirdly.
Yeah.
So I was typing, like trying to just do changes, and suddenly like the whole sentence would jump onto a different page, or the sentence would spread out, so the letters were like multiple.
That wasn't
inches
Word,
apart.
that was a poltergeist.
No, that was a poltergeist, yeah.
Which is fair.
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of rattling their world a little, so.
It was thematically relevant for sure. So yeah, once I'd wrestled through all of these documents, it was a lot to do in a short amount of time, because Bloomsbury had only set aside time for light edits, and I was doing these very heavy edits. So it's actually a heroic effort by the Bloomsbury team to get all 4 of those revisions out in the time that they did.
How long did it take you from when you started editing the Bone season to when you got all the way through all 4?
Do you know, I don't remember. I think I was just so focused. It was like time was just rushing past. It definitely took a couple of months, I think, at least, but it was it was much bigger project for a short time that had been allocated.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So, I and probably everyone here loves the world that you've created in the Bone season. Rereading it has actually gotten me out of a horrible book slump, so thank you. Where did the idea for the Bone season series come from originally, for those who are either just discovering it or who aren't familiar with it?
So it's really 2 ideas. I'm nothing if not ambitious, so I could have just written 2 separate series out of the 2 ideas. So one of them was, I was studying at Oxford, and I really struggled at Oxford. I had come from a state school, and traditionally, Oxford's been more associated with private schools that you pay for. So I felt really out of my depth, and like I had imposter syndrome the whole time I was there. And like I said, even before I got the book deal, I was quite anxious. I was struggling with, being away from home for the first time. And I imagined Oxford as being this really dark, oppressive place. And so I started thinking of the different colleges at Oxford of being residences for these slightly terrifying supernatural creatures who were controlling young people and forcing them to go through tests. And I sort of laced a few different Oxford traditions into the bone season. So when the clairvoyants do the different tests in the book, they get awarded tunics. So there's a white tunic, a pink tunic, and a red tunic. And that's based on an Oxford tradition where you will wear a carnation on your uniform for each type of exam you're taking. So for the first exam, you wear white. The last exam you wear red, and all the middle exams you wear pink.
No yellow for
No
if you're
yellow.
just too cowardly to take your exams, like I would be.
Yeah. That was me. That was like wishful thinking. Yeah. So yeah, that's always a tradition I kind of liked at Oxford, and the idea was that the flower is being slowly stained with ink, but then students would joke that it was being stained with your own blood.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, red, like.
Yeah, it's a lot. So you'd see it was kind of nice because you'd see a student with a red carnation and you'd know it was almost over for them. So you just shout like, congratulations. So yeah, I liked the idea of turning Oxford into a dystopia for various reasons. It kind of lends itself to it. Like it has a whole like weird internal jargon. Like I don't think anyone realizes this as well, but there's like a tradition at Oxford that you marry someone, you have like a student marriage, and then you have student children. It's really strange. Yeah, and like so some people get really serious about it. Like there's like proposals and everything.
I have a child who wishes to attend Oxford, so this is very useful.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm like, how about UVA? Or UCLA?
Yeah. Tell them that Magdalen is pronounced Magdalen because I didn't know that. Magdalen College. Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. It looks like Magdalene, but it's Magdalen, and there's no reason for that really. It's apparently based on the medieval pronunciation, but I think it's just being a bit pretentious. The other idea I had was clairvoyance in London. And I got this idea from when I was working as an intern in Seven Dials, which is a district of Covent Garden. And they sell a lot of crystal balls and tarot cards and that kind of thing in the area. There's like shops offering psychic readings and astrology, palm readings, that sort of thing. And I was really intrigued by the idea of like a magic system based on different kinds of divination and communication with the spirit world. So I sat down and just wrote down tons of different ideas like mediums, soothsayers, augurs, like all of the different ways in which humans have like foretold the future or communicated with spirits. And I tried to find similarities between them. And that's how I created the 7 orders of clairvoyance. And then I rolled those 2 ideas together and the bone season came up.
A beautiful marriage. So without giving too much away, can you tell us how the final version of the Dark Mirror changed from your original outline that you created, I think in 2023? Is that...
Yeah.
Or 2013, sorry.
Oh yeah, 2013. Well, when I was setting out to write this series, I had to write a synopsis for Bloomsbury because they originally bought 3 books in the Bone Season series, but it was always a projected 7-book series. So I wrote a synopsis out, and I didn't necessarily know exactly every inch of where the series was going at that point, but I knew pretty roughly like how it was going to end. The Dark Mirror is the one that's changed the most, and that is because in the original synopsis for the Dark Mirror, there was going to be this whole pregnancy plotline. And it was like a classic, mortal, immortal, like, oh, they can't possibly have children, but suddenly they have. And then I realized somebody had already done that.
So no growing unusually fast and bonding with a werewolf.
No. And then I realized
Thank you.
I don't want an animatronic playing a baby in my film adaptation. Because that would happen. They would give it like weird glowing eyes. It would not be good. Honestly, yeah, more seriously, it was because I just didn't think Paige suited that as a character. Like, I've written extensively about parenthood and motherhood in A Day of Fallen Night and The Priory of the Orange Tree, but for Paige, I just don't think it really suited her. So, yeah, that was...
Not at all.
No, it would be weird. No,
I feel strongly about this.
It would be really strange. Like, I have an idea to write like a silly crack story where Arcturus and... I think it would be funny to see Arcturus trying to cope with being a father.
That would be beautiful.
Yeah, because to refs, like they don't reproduce at all. Like they're just created by their world. So to him, the idea of like pregnancy or just the idea that having sex could produce this baby that wants milk all the time, it's really weird. He would just be baffled by that. Yeah. So I think it would be funny, but perhaps not in the main series.
We're waiting for it now. It is. She has said it.
Oh, I will do it.
It's happening. Okay.
I'll 100%.
We were all witnesses. So you have obviously had Paige in your head for a really long time.
Yes.
How has she changed in ways that you didn't expect when you first met her in your 20s?
I think the main way she's changed is just to do with me changing, because when I wrote her at 19, she was very like me at 19 in some ways, not in all ways. Paige is very reckless and she tends to make decisions on the spur of the moment. I took 6 years to choose my kitchen tiles, so we're not. They're great kitchen tiles, I should add. It was a great decision. It just took me a really long time. But I think that there was like an anger and a confusion in her when she's 19, and I recognized that in myself when I was going back to revise the series. And I noticed she is a very angry character in the original version, and she has every right to be. But when I revised her, I think that changed slightly, perhaps just because I'm older, and I would sometimes be like, oh, Paige, you need to be a little bit more sensible with your anger, you know. So now she reads a little bit like a 33-year-old woman stuck in the body of a 19-year-old, which I suspected might happen. Yeah, in terms of how she's changed, it's kind of a weird timeline, the Bone season, because I've written it over more than 10 years, whereas in the world of the books, only about a year has passed, which is wild, because originally it seems like Paige has aged 10 years in a year, because her voice has matured so much in that time. But yeah, I think she just has a slightly more jaded anger to her now. She goes through things in the series that force her to change her attitude towards things. But yeah, I think I would just say that she's toned down her anger slightly and replaced it with something a bit colder. It's more of a cold.
She's very
anger.
strategic. I
She
noticed
is.
in the reread as I'm doing it. I'm like, oh, she seems like she's really thinking about what her next step is more carefully. She's being more calculating.
Yes.
I really love that for Paige. I feel like it's a beautiful way to sort of call back what she became in the later books, like to that first book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt because she's been raised by this criminal mastermind and she's been trained and sort of groomed by him, then I needed to show that more in the first book, because in the original, like I said, she was often very kind of blindly angry. And again, it does make sense. She has a right to be angry, but I thought she might be a little bit smarter about how and where she applied that anger. So like you said, she does seem more strategic. And actually in The Dark Mirror, this is the book where she's learning from her mistakes, because she does make a lot of mistakes in the series. She makes some big mistakes in The Mask Falling, the fourth book, which is slightly inspired by Orpheus and Eurydice, that book. And Paige is very much Orpheus.
So let's talk about the cliffhanger at the end of that book. No judgment. I've done it. I've been there. As a writer, slow clap. As a reader, but you left us with this big cliffhanger. So where do we find Paige at the beginning of The Dark Mirror?
Oh, how much can I say without spoilers? So yes, at the end of The Mask Falling, it is a horrific cliffhanger, and genuinely I did not mean to leave it for 4 years. It was not my intention, and I feel very bad about it. So at the beginning of The Dark Mirror, Paige is outside the Republic of Scion for the first time ever in the series. So she hasn't been outside Scion since she was about 9 years old. So it's been quite a long time. And something I always wanted to do with this series was to take us outside the dystopia. A lot of dystopian fiction is set within like the confines of a certain place. It could be a city, it could be a country, it could be an empire. But I was always curious when I was reading things like The Hunger Games, like what is going on while America is feeding its children to this death gladiator
Yeah, like
game?
what's happening in New Zealand?
Yeah.
They're probably fine.
What are they doing? Are they even there? Or
Yeah.
do they have their own equivalent of The Hunger Games?
Right, yeah.
We never find this out. And I was always really interested by that. And one of the times that dystopia breaks that wall was in The Handmaid's Tale, which is one of my favorite books. And there's a moment where Offred, the main character, I'm sure most of you are vaguely aware of the context of The Handmaid's Tale, but it's this sort of misogynistic Christian theocracy. The main character, Offred, she sees a tourist come in from outside and kind of looks at her like she's a tourist attraction, and she has to lie and say that she's happy. But I was so interested in that because you can see the rest of the world is still trundling on. It's just specifically America that's become this theocracy. I was looking very... No comment.
Not gonna say anything. Just gonna let it go.
How are you guys?
Not great.
Yeah. Writing dystopia at the moment is wild, guys. But I did really like that bit in The Handmaid's Tale. So I wanted to replicate that on a larger scale in the Bone season. So you see London in the first book, you see Oxford, but then in the third book, you see Manchester and Edinburgh and how those are different from how London operates. In the fourth book, we get bigger and we go to Paris. And then in this book, this is the road trip book. So we go to quite a lot of places in this one. So we go to Italy, we go to Prague, we go to lots of different places. There's also Americans mentioned for the first time. There's quite a fun bit where Maria, one of the characters, says to Paige, like, Americans, what do they want with you? She's like, I have no idea. But yeah, it just gets a lot more global. And that's something I intended from the beginning. It's like the scope of an epic fantasy, but mixed with the hallmarks of a dystopia.
So can you tease anything about the relationship between Paige and Arcturus in The Dark Mirror?
Sure. Is he even alive?
We're very nice to them. In the last book.
Oh gosh,
Judgment. Maybe a little judgment.
Oh, you can't talk about tragic relationships.
No.
I'm not letting you get away with that. So I'll try to hint a little without spoilers, because Arcturus's fate is left slightly uncertain at the end of The Mask Falling. I will say this is the most romantic book in the series by a long shot. It was, even though The Mask Falling, each of the Bone Season books is based on a tarot card, and The Mask Falling was very much based on the lovers. So it was not just about Arcturus and Paige's romance, but also their friendship and how that develops, because that's like such a bedrock of their romance to me. They are friends first and foremost, and then lovers. This one, oh God, how do I even talk about this without spoilers? Talk about the fifth book in a series is so hard. It's romantic. It's very much about reunion and reconciliation. It's about them learning what they both need, basically, and how they express affection and love. And it is a very romantic book, and I feel like I can't say much more than that. Sorry.
All right, that was a great answer. That's all we needed to know. Yeah. Very romantic. Excellent. Yeah. That's all I really wanted. So memory, and specifically Paige's lost memory, play a role in The Dark Mirror. So I love books and stories that feature lost memory, recovered memories, amnesia, altered memories. So could you tell us why you decided to explore that theme with Paige?
Sure. I'm actually someone who is generally a bit skeptical of the lost memory trope. I think it's because it's frustrating, obviously, because the reader knows about these things, but the character doesn't. So I can see how that could be frustrating. But this book is very much about, the whole series is a lot about memory, because Arcturus, the love interest, he is an oniromancer, which is basically someone who can cause people to dream their memories. And so I always knew that memory was going to be very important in this book. And it made sense thematically for Paige to lose her memory and then to have lost the only person who can help her recover it. So that's part of why she spends a lot of the book looking for Arcturus, looking to reunite with him, because he's the only one who can help her. I'm fascinated by the theme of memory generally in the series. Like, there's so many things that are happening in the past that haven't yet been revealed, memories that have yet to be uncovered. There is a flower in the book called White Aster, which is really important in this book. It's basically a flower that causes memory loss. And at the beginning of The Dark Mirror, Paige has clearly been given this flower, but she doesn't quite know why. And a lot of it is like her wrestling with this sense of loss of identity. So she has 6 months missing from her memory, but weirdly it's 6 months that the reader haven't seen. So this 6 months is basically I was concerned that if I removed 6 months from her memory that the readers had already seen. It would be like, boring. Well, that's annoying, isn't it? Because we've already gone through that ground.
That's a good trick. Well done.
Yeah. 6 months that you haven't seen either. It's just she doesn't know yet.
Okay, awesome. So one of the things that I absolutely love about your books, you won't be surprised, is that I love that they're stressful. As a writer of stressful books, I really appreciate a good, stressful, tense. We are not relaxed at any point. No. We will not sleep. No. We will not think about anything but the book. Like, that's my favorite. So how do you pace your book and think about things like stakes and motivations and conflicts? Is that something that you think about as you're writing?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think I have a good gut sense of where I should kind of do different parts. I probably do something like the 3 act structure without quite knowing that I'm doing it. I never learned to write professionally. I taught myself. So a lot of it is just to do with experience and me kind of feeling my way through the book, like when I think the stakes need to go up and when I need to come back down again. There is quite a funny like pacing story associated with this book because there's like 3 chapters where Paige goes away from the main plot and basically has a romantic holiday.
Yes, we are here for it.
Yeah, so she has a little romance vacation. And I remember I knew I was going to have to argue this with my editor because I was like, it is kind of weird. Like, the stakes are climbing. They're preparing for this huge, like, sort of this confrontation in Rome. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, Paige is just going away on a romantic holiday. And I was like, look, this is so vital to the romance. I really need this to happen. Like, I want her to go to this city and just have this. It is important for the romance. It's just for the actual main plot. It seems quite strange.
Listen, I guarantee you those 3 chapters are going to be the most underlined and bookmarked chapters
Oh, no, definitely.
of this
definitely.
book. So don't even worry. You shouldn't even have to justify it. You should just be like, listen, everyone's going to love it. They're going to love it.
Well, weirdly, that I did try to justify it, but then my editor wrote back exactly that. Like, I think the words she used were just, Paige deserves it. Yes. And then we never spoke of it again.
There are other authors who could learn from that.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I've worked with my editor, Jen, for a really long time, so I feel like she was clearly in the situation where she's like, Paige just needs a rest and a break. And it's funny how many readers are asking me to give Paige a rest all the time.
Yeah, I get that a lot too.
Yeah, but then I'm like, I don't know, like if she was resting all the time, the plot would not go on, would it? We need to...
That's not stressful fantasy.
Yeah.
That's cozy fantasy.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
Yeah, I don't write that.
Yeah, no, nor I. So what are some of who are some of the side characters in in this series specifically that maybe you didn't expect to love, but found yourself sort of spending more time with than you thought you might?
I think the main one who fits that description is Maria, who is a really fun side character. And she was always just meant to be a side character. She was supposed to just appear in the second book of the series. She's basically this very, she's a very, how can I describe Maria? I'm trying to look for an adjective. She's very vibrant and she's a pyromancer. So she loves setting things on fire. And that's her solution to any problem is setting things on fire.
Legit, she's probably part dragon.
Yeah, no, she's great. I really love her, and she just ended up making herself so much more important than I thought she was going to. There's another character called Ivy in the series who was similar. Again, she was meant to be a side character for the second book, and I just felt like she had something more to offer, and she ended up being absolutely pivotal to the Mime Order. In terms of just side characters I love generally, my favorite is probably Jackson, who is a very not particularly likable character, but it's a weird mix because Jackson is basically he's a narcissist and he's someone who basically groomed Paige into working for him. But in order to make the reader understand how he did that, I have to make the reader like him as well, even as he's doing these terrible things. And I love the reaction.
So charming.
He is very charming, yeah. And that's the thing, he has to be charming.
I don't want to like him, but I do.
I know, that's exactly it. You're supposed to like him against your will, basically. And there's a moment in The Dark Mirror where he does something quite clever, like he manipulates the situation really beautifully. And again, my editor was like, yeah, I shouldn't be supporting him, but I kind of am at this moment. I'm rooting for him, even though he's doing something that is thwarting Paige. So he's a lot of fun to write. He's very flamboyant with his words. He's very eloquent. So whenever he comes onto the page, he just lights up the whole scene. And I try to make each character feel as if they could have been the protagonist in a different situation. Like, it is very much Paige's story. It will always just be from Paige's perspective. But I like to think that you could imagine other characters having their own version of the series.
Yeah. So in terms of like timing, were your rewrites for your preferred text done before The Dark Mirror was written? And if so, how did that inform the writing of this novel?
It was done during the writing of The Dark Mirror. So
you really like to make things easy on yourself,
yes.
Is what I'm getting.
I love doing that. That's why I wrote an 800-page book about dragons. That was very easy.
Great book.
Yeah, so I've been working on The Dark Mirror on and off since I wrote The Mask Falling in 2021. Even before that, actually. I feel like I've been drafting bits of this book for pretty much the whole process of writing the series. There are scenes in here that I've had some version of for many years. And I suppose I was trying with the revisions to bring the early Paige's voice in line with this Paige's voice, and also the voice of Paige in The Mask Falling. I felt almost like by that point I knew Arcturus and Paige very well as characters, and I knew who they really were. Actually, especially with Arcturus, like I feel like I went back to the first Bone Season book and I really tried to make him more like the person he is in The Mask Falling, because that's his real self. He's kind of masking his true self in the first two books initially, but sometimes I just felt like he was almost masking himself a bit too much. So yeah, I tried to make Paige feel more consistent throughout the whole series. And I think her voice does feel smoother now. It feels more like it's the same person rather than Samantha Shannon writing when she was 19 and then 33.
Yeah, no, I mean, I loved the book when it first came out, but I do think that you get to know your characters the way you get to know friends.
Absolutely.
And so if you've spent 10 years with these characters, you know them the way you would if you'd spent 10 years with a friend.
Exactly. And there were moments where I just was like, no, Arcturus wouldn't do that. Like, even in this situation, he just wouldn't behave that way. Yeah.
So I follow you on Instagram.
I follow you on
You should
Instagram.
all follow her too. She's great. It's Say Shannon, just so you know.
Shall I tell the story of why it's Say Shannon? Because
Yeah,
I
please
think a lot
do.
of people
Actually, I'm
ask
very
me.
curious.
It's so stupid. I think people probably think it's something very smart, but it's really not. Basically, when I was, I think about 15, I suddenly decided that I wanted to be called Say instead of because my friends called me Sammy, but no one's ever really called me Sam. So I decided I was going to be like super edgy, and I was like looking up what other nicknames are there for Samantha, and it was Say. I was like, I've never heard of a Samantha called Say in my life, but it was on like,
Right.
no, no. So I said to my friends, I want to be called Say. And they just said, no. But by that point, I had a Twitter handle, Say Shannon, and I kept it. And then suddenly one day after I published the Bone Season, I got verified on Twitter. And I was like, wow, if I change it now, I'm going to lose my special blue tick.
And you're Say Shannon forever.
Yeah, well, I mean, Elon Musk took my tick away anyway, but...
I'm impressed you're still there. I left long ago.
Oh, I'm not on Twitter anymore.
Oh, good.
No,
Very wise.
Bloomsbury controls my account on Twitter, but I haven't been there for many years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
gotta go.
But I did notice that sometimes your captions will hint at very fascinating research. So what sort of research did you conduct to prepare for this book?
I did a lot of research for this book, particularly travel-based research, because like I said, it's set in a lot of places, and I don't think it's necessarily vital to travel to, because it's a privilege to be able to travel, and you can certainly write about a place without having gone there. But for me, I like to be able to. I feel like there's things that I would miss if I didn't, like even small things like sounds and smells, just things like that. I also try to base all of the Bone Season places on real landmarks. So there's the headquarters of a spy organization in the Dark Mirror, because apparently I'm now writing a James Bond espionage thriller, and it's the building that it's based in is a real building, which is actually an art gallery as opposed to a spy headquarters. But I wanted
There could be a spy headquarters there.
It could be. It definitely suits it. But I wanted the building to feel accurate, like in terms of how the rooms link together and things like that. So I had to go and actually walk around and take photos and stuff. Also, because it is the real places that I'm writing about, people live there and they know they're going to know if I get it wrong. So there were moments where Paige is walking through Rome and I had to make sure I walked the same paths that she did. There's a scene where, a car is driving through different parts of Rome and I had to think about where the car was going to turn in order to get from one place to the other. So just small logistical details like that. And also just atmosphere. I've loved the Parisian catacombs, for example. That's it's actually my favorite place in the world, which seems very weird and morbid, but I promise there's a reason for it. But going there, I knew as soon as I arrived that I needed to put that in the Bone Season. It just felt like a Bone Season location. So yeah, it's just about atmosphere and detail. I did do something quite silly for this one. This shows the intensity of my research. So there is an Italian island called Capri, and there's a scene set on Capri in this book. And Capri has something called the Blue Grotto, which is a cave where the daylight basically shines through the water from outside. So it looks as if the whole cave is like shining with blue light. It's apparently very beautiful. and I wanted to go and see it. But sometimes the tide is too high, so you can't actually go in. And so I arrived in the morning. I was very excited. I was like, oh, yeah, this is going to be great. I'm going to describe it so beautifully. And this Italian man was like, sorry, tide's too high today. I was like, this is the only reason I came to Capri. And I was so frustrated. So just because I am unhinged, apparently, I decided to jump into the water without anyone looking, fully clothed. And just go because
High tide?
Yeah. I just really wanted to see the entrance just because I was like, well, I
Seeing the
might.
Paige similarities.
Yeah, just occasionally, just very occasionally. But it was weird because I was like, well, I need to. Basically, when you have to go to the bottom of a set of steps, and you can't actually see the mouth of the cave from the platform at the bottom. So I was like, well, I'm going to need to describe the mouth of the cave. I need to know what shape it is. And so that was apparently enough for me to fling myself fully clothed into the ocean with no one around. So if I'd been dashed against the rocks and knocked out, I would 100% have died. Thank God I didn't actually go into the cave because that would have been a death sentence. I managed to stop myself doing that. I did think about it. But then I got back out of the water and then realised that I was now completely soaked and again fully clothed. My suitcase was back at the hotel on the other side of the island. So I then had to walk around Capri for the entire day in like soaking wet white linen trousers. It wasn't great. Let's just say that. But you can't say I'm not committed.
That is impressive. I am, but I also feel like we do see that in the world building of your books. We do see the detail, we see the care and the love that you put into them. So, you have always built these sort of incredible fantasy worlds, but this revised edition adds a lot of detail to Paige's world. What have you learned about world building as you've written?
I've learned how to not info dump. that was something that was very prevalent in the first Bone Season book, I noticed. I think when I was younger, I had this huge world in my head. And when I was revising the Bone Season, I was genuinely quite sort of touched and impressed by my younger self because it was a huge idea to come up with. I don't think I have enough brain cells to come up with the Bone Season now, but my 19-year-old self would come up with all of these layers. But I think I was less skilled at conveying it to the reader. And that's such an important skill. You can come up with the biggest world, but if you can't, lead the reader through it and help them understand it, you're not going to write a good book. And my original idea in the first version of the Bone Season was basically to just sit the reader down and spend the entire first chapter telling them every single thing about the world. So essentially the early version of the Bone Season is like, hi, I'm Paige, and here is everything you need to know about where I live. And it just doesn't need to be in the first chapter. It was really overwhelming. Like when I read it back, I was getting confused, and I know this world back to front, and I was confusing myself. So I was learning where I could put things later in the text, basically. Like there was a moment where she talks about the sort of secret police of this world, for example. We don't need to know about that on page 2. It's completely irrelevant to the plot. So then I moved it to somewhere it was relevant to the plot. And it is still a lot to absorb. I think any fantasy book has a learning curve to it. So it's never going to be 100% a smooth ride, but I could make it a lot smoother. So now I do less info dumping, basically, I would say is my main world building takeaway.
It is something I think that young writers don't often realize. Like I end up mentoring or talking to a lot of young writers, and that's probably one of the number one things I'll say is like, do you really need this, or can you move it to chapter 5?
Exactly.
Usually you can move it to chapter 5.
Yeah, spread it out.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you 2 more questions. If you guys have questions, we're going to have a chance to ask Samantha those questions. So just get them ready in your brain. So dystopian fiction feels somewhat timely in America. What do you hope readers take away from Paige and the Bone Season series, if anything?
It's always difficult to say because I don't want to sound didactic. That's one of my fears with books, is that if you have a message too strongly, that it's going to come across as you preaching. And of course, the Bone Season has a fantasy element to it that, it separates it somewhat from reality. Having said that, there are things in there that are based on real life. Imperialism, colonialism, the suppression of language, the marginalization of certain groups of people. Not only are the clairvoyants marginalized in the book, but so are real groups of people like the Irish, for example, which reflects the historical treatment of Ireland by England. So I suppose, yeah, I don't really know if I would say a specific message. I would just say that it's it is like a mirror of reality. It is in a way a dark mirror, and I just hope that readers will take from it, like, just to be like Paige in terms of how she thinks about these things. You know, she sees the darkness in her world and she tries to act on it in some way. I suppose that's what I would say.
So, can you tell us anything about your next project or what you are working on now?
Sure. So my next project is what was a novella and is now a novel called Among the Burning Flowers, which is part of my other series, The Roots of Chaos. Thanks. I promise that it's not a long novel. There is another long Roots of Chaos novel coming, but not for quite a few years. But yeah, it's a short novel. We're calling it a Roots of Chaos tale. It was about 60,000 words, so it is short.
I was going to say, when you say short.
No, for me, that's really short. So 60,000, it's like maybe a bit shorter than a YA novel.
Yeah.
Like, what's that, like 80, 90, like for an average
like
one?
80,000.
Yeah, okay.
It's
so,
like a middle grade's like 60.
Yeah,
think.
okay. There you go. It's a middle grade sized Roots of Chaos novel. It's a standalone prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree. Yeah, it's good fun. Well, I mean, it's not. It's actually really dark and depressing, but I had fun. It's supposed to be an entry point to the Roots of Chaos universe, because I know that the Roots of Chaos books can seem quite intimidating, especially if you're not used to big, chunky, epic fantasy. So I've countless people have said to me, you know, it's been sitting on my shelf forever, but I've been too afraid to pick it up. So I'm hoping that this will be a gentler way to ease into the series. But if you are already a fan of the Roots of Chaos universe, it will provide like more depth to the lore. It's focused on Marisa Vitalda, who is the Princess of Iskalin in The Priory of the Orange Tree. So it's more about her story and how Iskalin fell to the kind of religion of the Nameless One. Then next I'm prioritizing Bone Season 6, because I do not want another 4-year gap between the books in the series. So that'll be my next thing. The deadline is in mid-July. So
that's when my deadline is. I'm not going to make mine though. Are you going to make yours? Please say no, so I feel better about myself.
No, probably not. I hope so. I'm going to try, but I feel like you and I kind of have a similar pace as writers, like just, you know, really wanting to get it exactly right. And I basically, like, I will move the deadline if I think it's going to affect the quality of the novel. Like, I'll always much rather that I'm putting out a book that I think readers are going to genuinely enjoy. And even though this book has taken a really long time, I'm very, very proud of the finished book. And I know it's my absolute best work that I've put out, and I know that in my heart. So yeah.
We will wait.
Thank you.
We will wait any length of time. Thank you so much. It was a lovely conversation. We will turn it over to questions from the audience. I guess there is a mic here, guys. So if you have questions, please walk up to the mic and ask them. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
My granddaughter just gave me the first book, and I'm on page 20, worrying that Paige is going to be killed any minute.
Oh,
wow. So thanks for
I can't make any promises, I'm afraid.
I think I got the gist.
I love America. You guys always get straight up for questions. Like in the UK, we're like, any questions? Everyone's like, really shy, yeah.
Congratulations on your new book. That's
Thank
all
you.
very exciting as well. And I have this question for you as well, Sabaa. Talking about, like, when you're writing, there's always a part of writing that, like, you know you're not good at, even though you don't want to admit it. So how do you mitigate that weakness and turn it into something that, like, you know you can cover yourself for or make good in some way to yourself?
What do you think?
I send it to my writer friends who are really good at it. So I was not good at writing romance. And
really?
yeah, I was really bad at it. I don't know. It was like some weird, like, probably because I grew up Muslim and wasn't allowed to date and like was really suppressed or something in that way from like my parents. Thanks, Mom. I like didn't know how to write romance despite actually having a really incredible romance. And so I didn't know what I was doing. So I sent it to one of my best friends and I was like, can you tell me if this is good? And she would send it back with like all these notes, like more kissing, more this, introduce this earlier. So like I find the people who are good at it and I send it to them. Yeah. I'm like, fix this, please.
I have to find ways to make it more fun for myself. So one thing I absolutely hate is writing battle scenes. I find them so boring.
Love battle scenes.
Oh, do you? Can you write mine?
Send it to me.
I would.
I'll
Love
send you
that.
my romance. You send me your
Yes,
battle
I would love that exchange. All I want is for my characters to sit around drinking wine, gazing at each other, and occasionally kissing. That would be great. Why aren't I writing like screenplays or something? Anyway, but battle scenes, I just find them really dull because even though they seem exciting on the page, it's basically just a lot of people moving. Just loads of moving, like, it's like somebody's foot's here, like somebody's kicking someone so in the face, and like I end up having to watch so many YouTube videos about like spear versus sword. There was a scene in the mime order, and when I revised it, that I had to be like, how would an unarmed person deal with a knife attack? And it's just a lot of movement basically. So what I did with the Dark Mirror is there's a very big battle scene in the Dark Mirror. Yeah, it goes across multiple chapters, and I realized what I had to do was make it completely and utterly unhinged. It had to be so absurd that it became fun. So there's so much happening in this battle scene, and it did become fun, and I ended up enjoying it just because it was so chaotic. So I suppose I just have to find a way to make it more fun for myself. And generally writing is fun for me, like I genuinely love it. But yeah, the battle scenes, now they're fun. I just have to make them really crazy.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
If you struggle with battle scenes, actually playing Assassin's Creed really helps.
I love Assassin's Creed.
I feel like doing the battle scenes in that game really helped me with battle more. Like I would do those battle scenes. They're obviously totally fake,
Yes.
but they work for like trying to translate battle to books.
Yeah.
Because you don't want the actual details. Like battle takes forever.
Yeah.
It's like boring. There's like orders being sent, and then people are sitting around all day, and like the charge doesn't happen until way later, and like it sucks. It's boring. So Assassin's Creed.
Creed. Yeah.
Sorry.
I think gaming in general is just such a fun way
So
to engage
great.
with storytelling generally. Yeah.
Hi. So one of the things that I really love about your books is how complex they are. Like there's tons of like different countries and the political systems and characters. So I guess my question is, how do you go about building these worlds and just keeping everything straight as you're writing?
Oh, I'm going to really frighten you with this answer. It's all just in my head.
That's really impressive.
Yeah, I don't actually. I write certain things down. Like I tend to need to visualize things to do with plot. So I find it's nice to kind of make a chart to see how all the things connect to each other, how one event flows into and affects the other. But no, in terms of like world building, it's just all up here. I think I have a remarkably good memory for that kind of thing. Like I can remember things about my own book. I cannot remember anything about my daily life, however. Like I have gone days forgetting to buy a carton of milk because I think it must just be the bandwidth in my head is taken up by my own world building. But yeah, I tend to need to write things down only at the beginning of the process, and then I just memorize it. Not a helpful answer, I know.
Well, as someone who does not have a good of a memory, I do appreciate all the maps, glossaries, and character sheets. So
I love doing that. It's hilarious when I do the maps though, because do you like get asked to like draw a map to to send, and then I don't know if you're good at drawing, but I'm not. No. You send like this child's crayon drawing of something, and like the Priory map just was like two massive blobs basically, and then somebody better turns it into something great, which is lovely. This is why it's great to have a team working on your books.
yes. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I love the presence of different languages like Irish and French, and that note about how you freshened up the French gender was really cool. I'm curious if you have any other like nuggets about either Irish or if there are any other languages that we'll be seeing in the Dark Mirror.
Yeah, there's a lot of Italian in this one. I could practically hear my audiobook narrator screaming because she has to do so many accents and languages in this series. Like she has, even off the top of my head, I think she has to do something like 5 different regional variations of Irish alone.
She's so good.
She's so good. Yeah, there was Neapolitan in this one as well. So I was fascinated by how different Neapolitan is from standard Italian, because I really wanted the scenes in Naples to have Neapolitan in it. But it's pretty much incomprehensible to most Italians. Like it's an entirely different language, which I hadn't realized. So I had to get this wonderful professor who specializes in Neapolitan. And I sent him all of the translations I wanted, and he sent it back in both standard Italian and Neapolitan. It was just very cool. Like I love language. There's a little bit of Venetian as well. Like somebody swears in Venetian, which was quite fun. What other languages are there? Yeah, it's mostly Italian in this one. There's like little bits of Czech. Something I did for research was I asked my Instagram followers, like basically there's a little detail between languages is nicknames. So if you have like the name Maria, for example, how that gets shortened in different countries and languages is going to be different. So I basically just put out a call to my readers, like, how would you, if you were in the Czech Republic, for example, how would you shorten the name Maria? And how would that be different if you were in this country? And that was really fun because it felt like a kind of joint collective response by my readers. So the nicknames are pretty much not me. That's my readers chiming in, which is great. In terms of language, a lot of my language play I do in the Roots of Chaos series, which was very much inspired by my time at Oxford. I studied English language and literature. There's a lot of influence from Old English in there and lots of different older and archaic forms of existing languages. There's also extinct languages like Gothic and Cimmerian that goes into the naming. Yeah, there's a lot of language love in my books. Also, I do apologise. I can hear that I'm sometimes tripping over my words. I have had 2 hours sleep. That's why I'm so sorry. Thanks.
My question is a little bit sillier.
Oh no, I love a silly question.
If you had to take Arcturo and Paige and put them into the world of the Roots of Chaos and take Aod and Sabran into the world of the Bone Season, which couple do you think would do better in the other person's world?
Oh, this is so hard. I feel like Arcturus would do okay in the world of the Roots of Chaos, like because he's just like a big, strong, like ref, isn't he? He can just kind of move through the world. I think he could like survive being burned by a dragon. He's fine. Paige, not so much. I think she'd be dead in like 5 minutes. Like she would shout at a dragon, and the dragon would burn her, and that would be the end. It would be a great way for her to go, but that would definitely be it. Sabran and Ede in the world of the oh man. I thought originally you were going to ask like what would happen if they kind of both entered the same world, and I had an answer for that because I play The Sims 4. And I make my own characters in The Sims 4. I'm very aware I'm coming across as a massive nerd in this moment, but basically I make them all in the same world, and then they've made friends with each other. So now Sabran is best friends with Arcturus, and I was like, somehow that tracks. I don't really know why. Like but they both love music, so yeah, it works. I don't really know how Sabran and Ede would fare. I think probably Ede would join the rebellion. Sabran, like, she's very good at speaking, so I feel like she would probably have a slightly different role in the rebellion. Like, she'd be the leader while Ede was doing the sneaky assassin stuff. I think they would both survive each other's worlds, actually.
Thank you.
Hi. Something I really appreciate about your books is how you kind of illustrate disability and kind of like the chronic illness portions of like how clairvoyance takes a toll on people, both physically, like the gifts, and in the crime syndicates and stuff. And I remember you mentioning once that you get migraine with aura, and I was wondering if you could speak on how that influenced your process and how you continue to like both deal with that and incorporate it into your books in such like a caring and loving way.
I'm really glad you think so. Thank you. It was very much inspired by my migraines. In fact, all the auras in the books did come from that. I've had migraine since I was about 18, and I remember the day it happened, I thought I'd gone blind, like, because it's basically, if you haven't had migraine with aura, it often starts with a blind spot, and it basically knocks out part of your vision. And I remember I went first to the optician rather than the doctor. I don't know why, I should have just called 999. And I went to the optician and basically said, I've gone blind. And they were like, no, it's not your eyes, it's your brain. And I couldn't really understand that concept at first. Like, how could something in my brain be causing a visual issue? So that ended up inspiring the idea of the spirit sight as well, like where some characters can see spirits visually, but some of them can't. And yeah, the aura and the toll it takes. I've always been in some kind of pain, basically, since I was 18, constantly. And I have talked about this a bit before in why I'm a slightly slower writer than some of my colleagues. I've always felt this envy of writers who can just pump out 1 or 2 books a year, because I knew that I would never be like that. I've too many of my days are lost with pain. And it's such a hard thing to write when you're in pain in your head, you know, because it's like you can't think around this pain. So yeah, I wanted, I kind of applied that to the world of the Bone Season in terms of, there's a saying, the ether takes as often as it gives. So Nick gets migraines in response to his gift. Paige gets her migraines and nosebleeds. Eliza has a sort of almost like a migraine reaction when she has the spirits possessing her. So yeah, I suppose I just wanted to weave my experience through the story and hope that other people saw themselves reflected in it as well.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sam, but I'm thinking of going by Say.
Don't. Don't put it as your Twitter handle.
So one of the things I liked that you mentioned was when you were editing the Bone season that you went back and kind of thought to yourself, Paige, like, let's slow down a little bit. Let's think about things.
Yeah.
How do you walk that line as someone who is an author and you have to get sort of logistical things out versus being someone who is a reader and kind of wanting to give those things that we really vibe with?
Do you mean like in terms of like how quickly the plot is moving versus like Paige's actions, or?
Any way you want to take the question.
Sure. I will take the question in terms of like the way that I would sometimes react to Paige's character when she was doing a lot. She was sometimes doing a bit too much that I thought was bordering on just didn't really make sense. I found it interesting in terms of characters needing to be active versus what they would sensibly do in real life. There's a moment in The Mask Falling where Paige hands herself over to Scion. And I knew that that was going to make readers angry because she's done that once before. And it was already ridiculous. Now I'm going to tell you that that was my editor's idea. In the original version, Paige does not hand herself into Scion. She's captured by Scion, right? But my editor said to me that that was passive, that the character was behaving passively. And there's always this idea, well, not in all types of fiction, like not in literary fiction so much, but in YA and kind of action-packed books, there's an expectation that the character must always be active. And I think that did somewhat inform Paige's personality, this pressure that she always has to be being active and doing and keeping the plot moving. So weirdly, it ended up forming Paige into this sort of very reckless character, but that wasn't always with my intention behind it. It was just this pressure to keep the plot moving. And it's the reason I wrote The Dawn Chorus, which is a novella for the Bone Season series. And The Dawn Chorus is an exploration of Paige's trauma. And sometimes with trauma, you just can't keep moving. You just have to stop and reflect and process for a while. And I felt like I literally had to write a novella that was separate from the main series to allow that to unfold properly, because otherwise there's this pressure again to keep the plot moving. And I wanted Paige to just be able to stop for a minute. So yeah, sorry, that was quite a convoluted answer to your question, but it was just, it's basically when you're thinking about books, remember that there's stuff behind the scenes that the author's being asked to do as well.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. So I originally listened to the audiobooks.
Yeah.
And then when I picked the book up, this one to start reading, I noticed how you use like single quotations.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Because I'm British.
Is that just it?
Yeah, I see so many Americans talking about this. Yeah,
I've never seen it anywhere else, even with British authors or anything. So I was just curious. I saw you put a little thing in the back, but I didn't know why you decided to.
Yeah, so basically, historically, British authors, when we're published in America, our work is Americanized. So that means that we have like color, for example, the U will be taken out of color, the S's will be exchanged for Z's. It's like a whole process just to make it more palatable for American readers, including the quotation marks, because in the UK it's standard to use a single quotation mark, but when they go to the States, they double quotation mark them. However, I think there's a slight movement towards not Americanizing books so much anymore, probably because the general American public is probably perfectly capable of understanding the word color, whether it has a U in it or not. And it's, yeah, to me, it always felt a little bit patronizing. I just didn't really understand why it was necessary. Personally, I asked my books to stop being Americanized on basically Paige is Irish, and without my permission, some of Paige's words were changed for the American version because it was considered that American readers wouldn't understand them. And I felt that that actually went against the spirit of the book because Paige's language has been intentionally suppressed in the book. It's like her Irishness has been removed from her voice, and that's like part of the plot. So it actually really upset me when that happened because I was like, it doesn't make sense for Paige, who is Irish, to be describing things like an American would. Like, why would she be doing that? It doesn't make sense. So now my books aren't Americanized, but I can see it was never really a problem before that moment. Like, I didn't mind it. Like, whatever makes books more accessible, I really don't want to cause any unnecessary confusion. It was quite funny in the Bone season. There was like 3 words they asked me to change, and I'm going to see if any of you understand this word because it's so interesting. I've never seen an American understand it yet. Chipolata. What? No one gets it. It's a type of sausage.
Oh.
And they asked me to remove the word chipolata because it's not an American word. So it's stuff like that.
Okay.
But yeah, that's just been a historical thing. Some authors will still have it. Yeah, chipolata. Some authors will still have their work Americanized. So sometimes you will see the double quotations and sometimes you won't, basically.
Thanks.
But yeah.
It's just me. Cool. So that's all the questions we have time for. I don't know if you guys want to close out. But if not, thank you both for coming. Yay. If you're able to,